1451, two teenage cousins fled the same collapsed court in Moldavia in opposite directions, with nothing guaranteed ahead of either of them. This channel has already told that story. One of those cousins was Vlad. The other was a boy named Stefan, who would spend the next several decades becoming one of the most successful rulers in the region's history. By 1476, roughly 25 years after they'd run from the same burning court, their positions could not have looked more different. Stephen the Great now, ruling Moldavia with real authority and a formidable army, was in a position to actually help. Vlad, meanwhile, was still rebuilding his life after nearly a decade of Hungarian custody, still trying to find his way back to a throne he'd already lost twice before. In 1476, Stephen sent troops, real, documented military support, part of a joint Hungarian-Moldavian effort to put Vlad back on the Wallachian throne one final time. It worked, for a while. This is the true, well-documented story of Vlad's last war, the cousin who helped him come home, the throne he held for barely 2 months, and the death that historians still can't fully agree on 500 years later. To understand why Vlad got a third chance at all, you have to look at the broader regional chessboard in the mid-1470s, because none of this happened out of sentiment. By this point, this channel has already covered how Vlad spent roughly a decade in Hungarian custody, first as a prisoner, later in a much softer form of restricted residence, eventually married into King Matthias Corvinus's own extended family. Walachia's throne, in the meantime, was held by Basarab Laiota, a rival claimant with Ottoman backing, part of the same extended family network that had produced multiple competing claimants over the decades. By the mid-1470s, Ottoman pressure on the region was intensifying again. Stephen the Great of Moldavia was fighting his own increasingly difficult campaigns against Ottoman expansion, including, in January 1475, a major victory at the Battle of Vaslui that briefly became one of the most celebrated Christian victories against the Ottomans of that entire decade. But major victories rarely settle anything permanently in this region. The Ottomans regrouped, pressure returned, and both Hungary and Moldavia needed a reliable, capable, thoroughly anti-Ottoman ruler in Wallachia, not a rival who owed his position to the Sultan. Vlad, whatever else could be said about him, had never once in his life been an easy ally for the Ottoman Empire. His track record, the 1462 campaign, the Forest of Stakes, the raid on Mehmed's own camp, all of it already covered on this channel, made him, from a purely strategic standpoint, exactly the kind of ruler both Hungary and Moldavia wanted back in that seat. So in 1476, with backing from both his old captor's kingdom and his childhood cousins, Vlad rode toward Wallachia one more time. The 1476 campaign is genuinely well documented compared to some of the more legend-heavy stories this channel has covered. Multiple contemporary and near-contemporary sources, Hungarian, Moldavian, and Ottoman alike, describe its basic shape consistently. Stephen the Great committed real forces to the effort. This channel isn't speculating here. Moldavian troop involvement in Vlad's 1476 restoration is documented across multiple regional chronicles, a rare case in this whole story where an ally's support wasn't murky or disputed at all. Combined with Hungarian-backed forces under Transylvanian voivode Stephen Bathory, the joint army moved into Wallachia in the autumn of 1476, aiming directly at unseating Basarab Laiota. The campaign moved quickly and, by most accounts, decisively. Basarab Lyota's forces were pushed back without the kind of prolonged, grinding conflict that had characterized some of Vlad's earlier wars. By November of 1476, Vlad was back on the Wallachian throne, his third time holding it, and, though nobody involved knew it yet, his last. It's worth pausing on the strangeness of this moment. The same cousin who'd once fled a collapsed court beside him as a frightened teenager was now powerful enough, in his own right, to help put him back on a throne. 25 years of separate, brutally difficult paths, briefly intersecting again at exactly the moment Vlad needed it most. It should have been a turning point. In a lot of ways, it was. Just not the kind anyone was hoping for. Here's the part of military alliances that doesn't always make it into the celebratory version of events. Allied armies don't stay. Once Basarab Lyota was driven out and Vlad was reinstalled, the bulk of the Hungarian and Moldavian forces that had made the victory possible did what Allied forces in this era typically did. They withdrew, returning to their own territories and their own pressing concerns. This wasn't betrayal exactly. It was simply how regional alliances worked. Stephen had his own borders to defend against renewed Ottoman pressure. Hungary had its own priorities. Neither kingdom had committed to permanently garrisoning Wallachia on Vlad's behalf. The goal had been regime change, not indefinite occupation, which left Vlad holding a reclaimed throne with a domestic support base that had been thin to begin with, and was now thinner still. Basarab Lyota, meanwhile, hadn't been eliminated, simply pushed out, very likely retreating toward Ottoman territory to regroup and wait. Multiple historians read this stretch of Vlad's final reign as a race against time that he was aware of, even if he couldn't fully control it. A throne reclaimed by borrowed strength, with the lender already halfway out the door. He had, by most estimates, somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks.
What happened next is where solid documentation becomes genuine historical disagreement, and it's important to be honest about exactly where that line falls. By December 1476, or January 1477, depending on the source, Vlad was dead. On that basic fact, essentially every chronicle agrees. The most widely cited account places his death in battle, along a stretch of road between Bucharest and the town of Giurgiu, near the Danube. Fighting forces connected to Basarab Lyota's regrouped, Ottoman-supported return. In this version, Vlad's small remaining force, depleted by the withdrawal of his Hungarian and Moldavian allies, was simply overwhelmed, and Vlad was killed in the fighting, likely alongside a relatively small personal guard. But a second, genuinely disputed account exists, taken seriously enough by multiple historians that it can't just be dismissed as legend. This version suggests Vlad may have been killed not by clearly identified enemy forces in open battle, but in a chaotic ambush. Some accounts specifically raising the possibility that disguised Ottoman soldiers, or infiltrators positioned among his own men, played a direct role, with confusion in the fighting meaning even his own guard may not have immediately realized what was happening. A third, related theory holds that betrayal from within his own diminished ranks, boyars once again calculating that survival meant switching allegiance at exactly the wrong moment for Vlad, played some role in how quickly and completely his small force collapsed. We genuinely do not know, with full confidence, which of these describes what actually happened in those final chaotic minutes. What multiple sources do agree on is what came next, and this channel has already covered it directly. his head was removed and sent to Constantinople, delivered to Sultan Mehmed II as proof that his most persistent enemy in the region was, after nearly 3 decades of conflict between them, finally gone. 29 years, roughly, from the moment a teenage hostage learned his father and brother had been murdered, to the moment his own head reached the same empire that had once held him captive. So here's what this episode actually adds to everything this channel has already told you. Vlad's final throne wasn't won through his own strength alone. It came through Stephen the Great's documented military support and Hungarian backing, the same complicated network of alliances and obligations that had shaped nearly every turn of his adult life. And it was lost, at least in part, for exactly the same reason it was won. Borrowed strength doesn't stay borrowed forever. Allies withdraw. Armies go home. What's left is whatever you actually built yourself underneath the support. And after nearly a decade in Hungarian custody, Vlad's own domestic base in Wallachia had had very little time to rebuild. There's something genuinely poignant in the fact that his cousin, the other frightened teenager from that collapsed Moldavian court 25 years earlier, was the one powerful enough by 1476 to give him one final chance. And there's something genuinely tragic in the fact that even that wasn't enough to make the chance last. Historians will likely keep arguing about the exact final minutes of his life for as long as anyone studies this period. Battle, ambush, betrayal. The specific mechanism may never be fully settled, but the larger pattern of his entire life was, by this point, unmistakable. Alliances that could save him were the same alliances that could never quite protect him completely, right up until the last one. Every week, this channel goes back into the true history behind the legend the world calls Dracula, the forest that made an empire retreat, the grave still debated centuries later, the feast that became a reckoning, the ally who manufactured a monster, the raid that gave that monster its face, the river that may have taken someone he couldn't save, the exile years, and the cousin who walked out of the same darkness into an entirely different legacy. And now, the final war that same cousin helped him fight and still couldn't help him survive. Subscribe if you want the documented history, disagreements included, not just the parts that make a clean story. We'll see you in the next Chronicle.